Hey folks, my name is Bryce, otherwise known as Orthicon, and today I am answering 20 questions about my vinyl record collection. This is the vinyl tag. I own about 700 records, give or take. I'm actually almost fully maxed out for space in this tiny apartment. So in fact, I'm actually selling more records than I am bringing in at this point. My turntable is a vintage Thorens TD160. I would like to do a proper video outlining my entire setup at some point, so I won't go into too much detail here. Let's focus on the records, focus on the music. I started collecting records when I was 17 years old, meaning that this video actually marks a 10-year, 1-decade anniversary of when I first started collecting records. Yay! The oldest record that I own is Stan Kenton's New Concepts of Artistry and Rhythm. This bad boy is from 1952 and marks a really interesting period for jazz. In a time when jazz listeners were moving more towards the bop scene and smaller ensembles, trios, quartets, quintets, Stan Kenton was keeping the notion of the large, big band ensemble alive. Now, in doing this, he was experimental and self-referential. Kenton opens up this record physically introducing each member of the orchestra.
And I'd like to direct your attention, if I may, to the mellophoniums in this number.
It's very long and drawn out, but once you make it past that point, you're treated to a bunch of really amazing compositions, most notably the ones by Bill Russo, a trombonist, my favorite of which is Improvisation. Now, I can't say for sure what my first record was, because for about the first year that I was listening, I was predominantly listening to
Okay, so peep this. Only like a few minutes into shooting this brand new sort of like YouTube adventure, brand new endeavor sort of thing, I've already found myself in something of a privilege-laden, nepotistic rant about listening to old records of my father's, most notably some audiophile pressings. I gotta cut this out, man. Like, it just comes across as so skis-ball.
It's tough to say which records I actually bought with my own money first. However, I've got it narrowed down to a couple here. The first of which is In Our Bedroom After the War by Stars. Not a particular favorite of mine in their discography, but I have held on to it after all these years, simply because there are a few songs that I really, really am keen of, particularly My Favorite Book and The Ghost of Genova Heights. Magpies. The other possibility of which it could be is a 7-inch by Canadian group Arkells. This is the Oh, the Boss is Coming 7-inch. It is numbered out of 300, mine is 174. There isn't particularly anything special about this pressing, it is just a standard black single. But this pressing actually came before they re-recorded the song for their debut album, so it does feature a different version than what most people would know. Oh, colored vinyl, you are what everyone seeks, however, there are only so few of you pressed. Personally speaking, I'm not a huge colored vinyl person. I typically wait a little while after an album comes out to know that I'm really into it before I splurge and purchase it, and when it comes to colored vinyl, you typically have to be an early adopter. The particular concern I have when it comes to this question is whether it is my favorite colored record aesthetically or my favorite music that just happens to be on colored vinyl. Luckily for you guys, I kind of got both covered here. As far as aesthetic goes, nothing can beat the Record Store Day exclusive Flaming Lips and Hetty Fuentes pressing. This was a surprisingly underrated album as far as I'm concerned, and the pressing itself is really interesting. They're all hand-dipped, so each record is a little bit different. This one is just an amalgam of marbled colors, just beautiful, swirly, and gorgeous. No sticker in the center either, which means that you get the full, clean effect of the marbling. Now, if we're talking about the flip side, music that is some of my favorite but just happens to be colored, I had to give it to the seminal 2001 album by the Avalanches, Since I Left You. This is a major highlight of turntablism, of plunderphonics. It's one that I was introduced to back in college, and I just have yet to put it down since. After about 16 years of kind of radio silence, the Avalanches did end up releasing a second album after Since I Left You. It's called Wildflower, and it is quite good. Came out last year. This one, from Modular and Astral Works, is on this beautiful translucent blue vinyl, and it's one that I am more than happy to finally have in my collection. I have a ton of discount records, mainly because I have been buying used more often lately, just because times is kind of tough. Probably my holy grail discount record find, at least that I can think of right now, is Tupac's Greatest Hits. It was pressed only a few times in 1998 and was the first major posthumous release after Tupac died. It is the disc in which one of his biggest hits, Changes, debuted, and it's actually this mammoth 4 LP box. Now, my brother and I listened to this record a ton when we were kids. Probably inappropriately so for a couple of white 10-year-olds, but there was a certain rock star attitude with which Tupac delivered his bars. Having listened so much to the CD copy of this over the years, it is really nice that I was finally able to find a vinyl copy, even if it is in less than perfect condition. And perhaps the most exciting thing about this record is that even after all these years, blasting Hit 'Em Up at full volume is still an excellent way to alienate your neighbors.
That's why I your you fat motherfucker. West Side.
Now, I can almost undoubtedly say that two of my most prized possessions are my audiophile Bjork records. Now, this is Vespertine. Vespertine was released in 2001, and it is the direct metal mastering super audiophile crazy edition from her label One Little Indian. These were all limited to 1,000 copies, and there are pressings of this nature for all of her studio LPs up until Volta. Each of the records are pressed on 200-gram virgin vinyl, and the remaster that took place at Abbey Road is one of the best-sounding remasters that I've ever heard, regardless of artist, regardless of genre. Unfortunately, there are some unsightly scene splits on this record, but it was imported from the UK. Actually, this was an incredibly thoughtful gift from next of mine, so shout out to you. You know who you are. Thank you so much. A record by a female artist?
All right, let's face it here. This is a patronizing question that in its basic construction assumes that the only artists one would pick for a list like this are men. It, like the lived experiences of women in the Western world, reek of institutional misogyny. It pits women against one another. It plays women as the other, and that is the capital O, other. And to what end? We as a society waste infinitely more time fighting with one another over the semantics of disenfranchisement instead of, actually working to rectify the plight of marginalized peoples. He says while trying to deconstruct a YouTube list. Are there not better things to do with my time?
In much the same way that this question marginalizes women working in music, I have picked an artist who is working in a marginalized musical industry for women, and that is Micah Levy's Under the Skin soundtrack. First of all, this record is spooky as hell. Micah Levy has done an incredible job on all of her compositions for film, both on Under the Skin as well as Jackie. But alas, next time you're on the internet, be sure to look up a list of female composers working in contemporary film. It's a smaller list than you'd like to see. Next up is a record by my favorite band. Now, I'm not entirely sure what my favorite band is. I don't think I'll ever know for certain, but I have decided to pick Asia by Steely Dan. Rest in peace, one half of Steely Dan, Walter Becker, who passed away very recently. And Impulse by, oh boy. I have bought a lot of records on Impulse, but I don't think I've ever bought a record on Impulse in quite the same way as the one that I'm about to show you. This is Two-Headed Freep, the debut album by Ronnie Foster. This came out on the Blue Note record label and is notable not necessarily for the album as a whole, but for one particular sample. The song Mystic Brew was sampled most notably by A Tribe Called Quest, but also by the seminal hip-hop producer Madlib, as well as by J. Cole and countless others. Ronnie Foster is a jazz organist, but he really has an ear for R&B and funk melodies. And so, although this album is maybe a little more structured than what you would typically hear out of the Blue Note catalog in and around the time this came out, it is still a really excellent listen. Next up is a record that was a gift. Now, I have a lot of gifted records, but one of the most recent comes from my brother Cole, and it is Herbie Hancock's Headhunters. This is the Music on Vinyl reissue, and it sounds incredible. Like Ronnie Foster the year before him, at this point in his career, Herbie Hancock really stepped back and focused on what a jazz audience would want. So by listening to the Pointer Sisters play on stage, he decided that people wanted to dance, out of which Headhunters was born. Oof, my most played record? God, that's really tough to say, but I'm pretty sure that it is going to be an album by the Housemartins. The album is called London Zero Hull 4. This is a Britpop record from the mid-80s. Little known fact, at least for people in the West, is that bassist from this group is actually Fatboy Slim, back before he made his name in 90s electronic music. I'm sure if I tried, I could probably find something a little rarer even from this collection, but for a rare vinyl record, I am picking Extraterrestrial Research by a Greek experimental techno producer named Circle. Now, what makes this record so special and rare, at least for me, is that the majority of the copies were actually distributed throughout Europe, meaning that only a handful of copies circulated throughout the city. Although this is a Greek producer, this is a local record that was put out by a good friend of mine, Evangelos Lambrinidis II, on his label Deep Sea Mining Syndicate. I'm incredibly privileged to have a copy of this, and although there might be rare records in my collection, damn, there might not be any more special. So right now we need a rainy day record. I love rainy day records. The one that I'm picking is an oldie but a goodie, 1999 self-titled album by American Football. There is a Chinese emo group out there called Chinese Football that is 100% worth checking out. It is not tongue-in-cheek, it is 100% serious. Please go listen to it, it's that good. Now, on the flip side, we need a feel-good record. So for this, I am picking possibly one of my favorite records of all time, and that is OG, Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. Now, instead of picking a record that is nostalgic to me personally, I decided to find a record that is perhaps representative of nostalgia as a whole. And that, of course, is the Charlie Brown Christmas soundtrack. Vince Guaraldi, Fred Marshall, and Jerry Granelli. A Charlie Brown Christmas has been playing on TV every year since its release. I can almost be certain that most everyone in the Western world has viewed the program at least once. Now, because of the ubiquity of the program, its accompanying soundtrack, which is very heavily featured in the program itself, is ingrained into people's memories. I like to think that it would only take 5 seconds of Linus and Lucy for people to recognize instantly, that's Christmas. Next up is a record store day purchase. So for this, I have picked the Karen Elson single, Vicious. Now, what's particularly cool about this, and it should be clear as day, no pun intended, looking at the record itself, but they've actually embedded paper flowers throughout the record, visible on both sides. Thank you, Jack White. Thank you, Third Man Records. It's a taste of your lips, I'm on a ride. Okay, they gone away. Last but not least, we are looking for a recent acquisition. I was gonna pick a Stooges record that I had just picked up, but I literally just got one today, and you've been staring at it this whole time, so I may as well show you guys real quick. This is a bootlegged copy of Frank Ocean's Blonde, the modern classic, as people would like to insist. I think it's aight. I think it's good, but I don't know if you've checked the Discogs prices for the official vinyl release. The bootleg itself sounds pretty nice, certainly no worse than the MP3 versions that are kicking around. More than anything, it's just cool to have a cultural artifact for an artist that has been held in such high regard and has been so critically acclaimed over the few years that he's been actively making music. I don't have anyone to tag this in, nor do I even have a proper way to end the video. So I will just say, my name is Bryce, otherwise known as Orthicon, and thank you so much for watching my vinyl tag video.